Welcome, everyone, to the Daily Fantasy Pivot on rotocurve.com. This is going to be a fun Friday, let me assure you of that. But before we get to all the good stuff, of course, this is a show aimed to teach everyone how to play the game of daily fantasy basketball. We're here to help you as much as we're here to consult you and everything else. And we definitely want to enhance your skills to try and get to expert level. That's why we're here. Don't forget, today is the day of the free roll. So check out the free roll on DraftKings. You can find that rotocurve.com/free roll. You can find the NBA tools at rotocurve.com. Just scroll to the top, click NBA tools. There's PGA tools. There's all the tools you could ever ask for. But today, it's going to be a fun show for a multitude of reasons. Let's start out with Josh Collacchi, one of our contributors who you know, accidentally poisoned himself at however old you are. How old are you? 25?
Yeah, just turned 25. Maybe 10, though, for what you're about to say.
At 25, the kid's still eating Lunchables and for some reason not cooking them. So, for all you out there, that leads to salmonella. And Collacchi was struggling to keep everything down before the show, but he's battling it out. Collacchi, how are we feeling?
It's good. It's good. It was actually a pizza Lunchable, so I think what got me was the second kind of cheese. The first kind of cheese was good. That went down well. But that second kind of cheese is really what gets you. But, yeah, if you guys are about that DFS life, it's all about the Lunchables. I think you guys know what I'm talking about with the timing, and you have about 45 seconds for lunch.
Oh, my God. Let me guess, you had Dunkaroos and Fruit Loops for breakfast as well.
No, milk takes too long to pour on the cereal. I can't do cereal.
There you go. Next, we're going to go to another contributor that you guys are familiar with, Nick Mensio. Nick, it sounds like you'll be shopping at Bayless Shoes tonight. Is that correct? At the point guard position?
Sir. Yes, sir. All the Bayless tonight.
So there you go. Nick looking for value at point guard tonight. I saw him say that earlier on Twitter. We're going to have a lot to say about Milwaukee. And now there's a guy you guys may not recognize if you just watch our show. If you watch all the rest of the stuff on RotoCurve, you've probably seen his face 10 billion times. He's the guy who looks like Mr. Rogers meets Jersey Shore. It is Benny Ricciardi. Benny, what's going on?
Hey, don't hate on the Argyle, all right?
I'm not saying I hate on it. I just don't remember when this show became a Gap commercial. And by the way, I wore this today, my sweater, just because I couldn't be the second best, dressed guy on the show. You come on as a guest, I got to make sure that I'm holding up my own.
Hey, I mean, it is what it is. I've been trying to get Collacchi to step up his wardrobe for a while, so we'll see. I don't know.
Oh, this is my formal wear, Benny. That went big time today.
I have to say, let me tell a story. Back in the day, I tried to get Collacchi a job. He showed up with that exact beard, no tie, his top two buttons undone. So getting Collacchi out of sweatpants is definitely a difficult proposition.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it probably is, to be honest.
Oh, it's 100% true. I wouldn't make that up. All right. Well, how many games do we have tonight? 10 or 11? Is
10.
It 10? All right. We got a 10-game slate ahead of us tonight. There's a whole bunch of goodies. Just off the bat, are you guys looking at any games and targeting any specifically, or is this kind of just a value-filled slate where you can find it? Let's start with you, Benny.
Yeah, I actually said this in the video this morning. Pretty much all the games are within that 200 to 212 range. The games that do have a little bit of a bigger total are also the ones that have the high spreads on it. So I think you can go a lot of different ways tonight because there's a lot of games that are all in that same, 5 or 6 point spread, a 210 point total kind of sweet spot. So I don't think there's really one or two games that sticks out that are must-use kind of games. I think there's 4 or 5 of them that you can really look at.
Nick, do you agree with that, or is there one you're targeting specifically?
I'm finding myself on that Minnesota-Milwaukee game a lot today, and then a couple of late games, Atlanta and the Lakers, and then Washington and Cleveland as well.
So we're looking at Minnesota-Milwaukee. I've got that total. I mean, this is outdated. I use Massey ratings for this. I haven't checked the updated numbers. Maybe one of you can update me on that. But that one's 204.5. I've got New York
213 this morning.
Yeah, I got 213 too.
Yeah, I think these Massey rating numbers are outdated. This is just, this guy uses a formula. But it basically, I haven't seen a big slate like this in a while where there's not really one real outlier game.
Yeah, there's not a lot of stars tonight either, so there's kind of so many different avenues you can travel down tonight for sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. And let's get right into that. Let's get started with point guard because there's a lot to go over tonight. Um, I think I'm going to start with point guard tonight because there's one guy who we consistently mention who I think is the first guy to mention tonight. I mean, D'Angelo Russell, Kobe Bryant, and Clarkson are both listed as questionable. I think they both got knee injuries, actually. And from a quote that I read earlier on Byron Scott, it sounds like he's preparing for both of them to miss the game.
Yeah,
So,
Kobe
I
was
mean,
actually just ruled out
Yep,
before we
just
started.
ruled out. Sore shoulder. Kobe is definitely out. Yep.
beautiful. So now we're talking 20% usage for Russell with both Bryan and Clarkson on the floor, 25.9 without. He scored 20 real points in 4 straight games. So, I mean, this is a guy that's balling. His price is rising with it, but I mean, it should be. So you just got to keep paying it, I think. Collacchi, what are you doing at point guard tonight?
Russell's actually one of the guys I'm going to click on for point guard as well, especially on FanDuel when you could use 2 and you have to use 2. And I said on Wednesday that I'm going to be using Russell pretty much no matter what until he's 7K. And he's only 6K tonight on FanDuel. And like you just said, the usage goes up without Kobe, of course. He has a 36-minute limit, I saw Byron Scott say today. But that's a good thing for me. That means he's expecting to play those minutes, and I'll take 36 minutes from a point guard against Atlanta pretty much any day of the week, especially when that game I expected to be a little bit more fast-paced with both teams going with smaller guys as their centers. And looking at Russell's last 4 games, he has 37, 49, 31, and 39 FanDuel points, and it's even higher on DraftKings. So this guy's been unbelievable. His price is still low, and I think he's a guy you definitely want in your cash games tonight.
Nick, where are you going at point guard? Are you on board with Russell, or you got other ideas?
Yeah, I also love Russell. I mean, I think he's a lock for 5x salary on FanDuel at 6K. That's all he would need is 30 FanDuel points, and he's been doing that consistently lately. But I don't know. I really like Kyrie Irving as well, especially with Kevin Love out. His usage rate gets a nice spike. Him and LeBron should carry the load for the Cavs. And then, like we mentioned in the opening, I love Jared Bayless tonight, so I'm gonna have to pick out of those 3. I just think Bayless, if Michael Carter-Williams is ruled out, I think obviously his minutes go up big time. So he's played 30 over the last 2 games with MTW out. So I like him a lot.
There you go. So here's a question from the chat room already, you guys. Atlanta's top, I've got them allowing the 6th most fantasy points to point guards and 5th in terms of defensive efficiency. Are we worried about that with D'Angelo Russell, or is this just one of those cases where his price is too cheap?
Yeah, I'm not worried about it at all because it's not only that his price is pretty cheap still for what he's been giving us over the last couple games, but he's also, he's going to get a lot of shots. He's going to get a lot of usage without Kobe, without Lou Williams, maybe even without Jordan Clarkson. I mean, they're basically running out of guards out there, and they're running out of guys that can put the ball in the basket. So he's going to have one of his better games. And he's actually only played 36 minutes 6 times so far this year. In 4 of those games, he's had 39 fantasy points or more. So, we're getting big production out of him on FanDuel whenever he does play those minutes. So on FanDuel, I love him at his price. On DraftKings, I like him. I still think you can use him in tournaments, but I don't think there's as much upside there. But I agree. The 2 guys on FanDuel that I think you have to roll, you're getting D'Angelo Russell pretty cheap, and then Kyrie Irving at 7K, like Nick was saying. Without Kevin Love in there, you got to expect him to go up. I know Josh was talking about him before we got on the show too. I mean, I think it's pretty easy at point guard on FanDuel tonight. I'm rolling those 2 guys in cash and tournaments and then using the money to spend up elsewhere.
That's exactly what I'm doing too, Benny. And like you mentioned about Irving, without Kevin Love on the floor, and Love is out again tonight, Kyrie Irving has a 36.3 usage rate. That's per NBA Wowie. He has an assist rate of 26%. And both of those numbers are second to just LeBron James, who I'm sure we'll talk about in a couple minutes. But those numbers are just really high. He gets an incredibly fast-paced game against the Wizards. He has a good matchup as the Wizards do struggle against point guards. So we always talk about checking the boxes. And for me, Irving does all of that tonight.
Yeah, so while you guys were talking about that, I was looking up because I know Cousins leads the league in usage, and I wanted to see just what he was. He's at 35.7. So whether I've got Irving at 35.9 without Love, but whether it's 35.9 or 36.3, the point is it's a lot. I mean, it would be a league leading total if Love were to sit out. I mean, Irving and Braun would just rule the world, basically. So I think both of them got to be heavy consideration. Now, so we've got our cash figured out for FanDuel. How about DraftKings or even tournaments in FanDuel? I mean, are you guys looking at guys like Kemba Walker? And for Kemba, I've got some statistics here. He's gone at least 20 real points in 10 of his last 11 games, and he faces the Pacers tonight, and his only double-double of the season came against the Pacers. Now he's 8,500 on FanDuel, 7,800 on DraftKings, and he's a really big discount on Fantasy Draft. Are any of you looking at Walker?
I like Walker's spot for sure. Like I said, I play on FanDuel mainly, so I'm looking at Kyrie and D'Angelo for cash. But Kemba's definitely going to be in some tournament lineups for me. I mean, he could easily crush that $8,500 price against the Pacers. The Pacers' defense is top notch, but that point guard spot just doesn't scare me. George Hill's not a great defender or anything like that. I'm not scared of him at all.
There you go. All right, so let's get into this topic, which I think is going to cause some unrest between us. How about the thought of Dennis Schroeder in cash, Mr. Collacchi? We've got Dennis Schroeder in what I consider to be a great spot tonight, where he's only played more minutes than Teague in 2 of the last 5 games, but he's outscored him in terms of fantasy points in 3 of 5. Teague only played 16 minutes last game against Golden State. We know that the Lakers are the worst team in terms of defending opposing point guards. Schroeder only 4,800 on DraftKings, so his price a lot better than on FanDuel, in my opinion. Is this a spot where you would be willing to take a chance that, without Kobe, without Clarkson, Atlanta's just going to beat them down? They got no reason to play the starters big minutes. Could you foresee Schroeder in cash?
I don't think I can do it tonight. I know that you're a guy that likes to take a little bit of more of a risk in cash games, and I think Nick is the same way. But considering you can just have guys like Wall, Kyrie Irving, Kemba Walker, D'Angelo Russell, even Donald Sloan in a good matchup, I just can't see risking Schroeder getting those minutes that he needs to hit value. Now, the thing is, he has that excellent matchup. He could have 15 to 20 minutes and still get over 25 fantasy points. But you're expecting something that doesn't happen often, and for me, I can't trust that in cash games.
I don't think I'm going to do it, let's put it that way, but I could see doing it, and I'm definitely going to have heavy Schroeder in tournaments. I mean, this is a guy who blows up when the coach decides that it's not a Teague night. And if he decides it's not a Teague night tonight, I think we could see a lot of Schroeder, and we know he's efficient. And the good news is, against the Lakers, you don't need that many minutes in order to score a lot of fantasy points, so the matchup certainly helps. Just wanted to throw a few other names out there, then you guys can throw your names. I think we're building around the Russells and the Kyrie Irvings of the world, but I actually think Kyle Lowry deserves some cash consideration if you got the extra money. 30 points against Damian Lillard last time. I actually think we've been underselling Lillard as, a defender recently, as, they've kind of been stepping it up against opposing point guards, but he still had 57.5 fantasy points. So Lowry, definitely a guy, if you're deciding between the Lowry or DeRozans of the world, like I always do when I look at that team, I think Lowry's definitely the guy to go with tonight. I also like Lillard specifically on Fantasy Draft. If you look on Fantasy Draft, he's basically priced as if he were $8,000 on DraftKings, and he's $9,000 on DraftKings right now. So that's just way too cheap. I mean, the matchup isn't great or anything like that, but Lillard's a guy who's been absolutely on fire. And wanted to mention DJ Augustine because without Danilo Gallinari, Augustine's actually found himself in three of their 4 most common lineups. So there's clearly plenty of minutes available for him, and he's still just 3,900, yet he's a big part of their offense. Does anyone have any other point guard plays for cash or even tournaments that they want to talk about tonight?
Well, I wanted the guy that I'm coming up to when I have the money to do so. 3 of the last 4 games over on DraftKings, he's gotten you over 50 fantasy points, 6x value at his price of 8,400. And he had a huge game. I think he had 52 or 53 fantasy points the last time he went up against Portland in the same matchup. So where I have the money to do so, and in some tournaments where I'm trying to get away from, probably Kyrie, because I think that D'Angelo Russell's just too good a play not to use him tonight. The guy that I have come up to was Lowry. And then if you want to get really crazy in a tournament, if you don't like D'Angelo Russell and you want to fade him, I think the way to do it over on DraftKings is to go to Ricky Rubio for $100 cheaper. I still like Russell more. It's definitely not something I'd do in cash. But like I said, if you think Russell's going to be 30, 40% owned like he was in some tournaments the other night, I know this is a bigger slate, but if you're looking to get away from him, you want to look at guys that are around the same price as him who are probably going to have low ownership. And I think Rubio in a paced-up matchup with Milwaukee, he's going to get some Bayless defense. I think he'll be perfectly fine with that. And if you look at his game logs, I was actually surprised to see him going 5.5 to 6x in like 6 of his last 8 games or something like that. So Rubio's been putting up some sneaky good numbers. So I'm not advocating anybody to run out and put Rubio into your lineups, but if you're looking for something off the beaten path for a tournament, I think he might be a way to go.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's one of my favorite strategies. It was actually earlier this week, I think. Rubio and Levine play next to each other, so people get scared of that. But if you're confident in the guards there, I love playing guys on the same team, nearly the same position next to each other, because you pretty much know if they're in a good matchup that one of them's going to blow up. And I did it earlier this week with Favors and Gobert against the Celtics. I knew one of them was going to blow up. I thought they were both going to be solid. And I didn't know which way it was going to go, so I just played both, and combined you end up with 5.5, 6 times value on DraftKings, and it works out. So I think Rubio and Levine is one of those contrarian ways you can go about it. And one other name, here comes Collacchi, Marcelo Huertas, bare minimum on both fantasy draft and DraftKings. Now, hear me out here. If in fact Clarkson and Bryant both sit, Byron Scott already said he wants to limit D'Angelo Russell's minutes, and if you look last game, Huertas played 30 minutes. Byron Russell, as we were discussing on Twitter today, is perfect for a little league team because the kids who suck, he would play them big minutes, and their parents would be elated with Byron Scott. And so if Marcelo Huertas' parents are at the game, I think they'll be happy. Scott just loves this guy. He loves random guys who suck, and 24.25 fantasy points last game would be well over 6 times value on DraftKings. We know this guy can pass. He's top, I think, 10 in terms of assists per minute in the NBA. So if you want to go absolute bare minimum and punt, there's not really any superstars on this slate, but I think Huertas is a guy you could look to. Collacchi, you want to respond to that?
I think I would play Marcelo Huertas if we were playing DFS soccer, but I'm not quite sure I can do it in NBA. One other thing I wanted to mention, I do love John Wall tonight in tournaments. He's getting a really fast-paced game. He leads the NBA in touches per game, and he has that matchup that we all drool upon when we look at Kyrie Irving, who really just can't defend me, and he's got about a foot on me, and he's definitely quicker. So if he can't defend me, how's he going to defend John Wall? So I like to look at him in tournaments. Definitely a way to pay up over Lowry, who I do think will be a top option, especially in tournaments. And you could pair him with a guy like Russell and not have to crush your cap room. And one other thing, just got news from the Sixers up here from Michael Preston. The Sixers will be without Jahlil Okafor, Nerlens Noel, Kendall Marshall, not Martian. He looks like a Martian. I don't want to be that guy, but and Nick Stauskas. So all those guys are out. That basically means the Sixers are going to have a 9-man rotation tonight. So that might be a thing to look at. We'll talk about that later.
Kendall Martian out tonight for the Sixers.
Thanks, Ricky. Appreciate it.
Just so everyone knows, we'll get to that situation when we get to the other positions, but let's go to shooting guard right now. Shooting guard for me, as most nights, kind of difficult. There's one guy who stands out to me. That guy's Chris Middleton. I'm sure Nick will agree if he really likes that game. Just a quick rundown of what he's done. 21 points in 4 consecutive. This is the stat that I love for cash. He hasn't dropped below 30.5 fantasy points on DraftKings since February 1st. Minnesota ranked 24th in defensive efficiency to opposing shooting guards, which is a lot of the time where Middleton plays on offense. So I think, he's kind of at a price that's right around where I'm comfortable playing him, but in cash games, I don't see a whole lot else. So I think that's where I'm going. Benny, what are you doing as shooting guard tonight?
Yeah, I actually like coming down a little bit. I agree with you. It's always a tough position, so I don't usually like spending up unless there's somebody I think is a standout. Middleton could have a good game there, but I feel like Giannis has been getting a lot more of the work over there, and it's kind of been, ticking Middleton down a little bit. I like guys in like that mid 5K to 6K range. Zach LaVine at 5,300, I think, is in a pretty good spot. They got rid of Kevin Martin over there, so he's seeing big minutes, playing over 30 a game now, putting up some good points doing that over there. And then here's a question I wanted to throw out there to you guys, because there's two guys that I hear everybody talking about, and I know everyone's going to be drawn to today. I'm really not a huge fan of Will Barton. I loved him. I thought he should have been going for like 30, 40 fantasy points all week here without Gallinari, but he hasn't produced at all in the last two games. I mean, I think he's given you like 20 fantasy points, like 3x value or so. And then the other guy that I think everyone's going to be all over tonight after his game yesterday is Devin Booker, who's pretty cheap. I think he's 4,700 on FanDuel, like 4,500 on DraftKings. He's below 10K still on Fantasy Draft. I think these two guys are going to draw a lot of people's attention, but I don't know if I really love either one of them, so I was wondering how you guys felt about those two.
I'll take it if no one else wants it. I mean, I think Will Barton's a prime tournament option for me today because we know that in this situation he should be better than he has been. And, he's frustrated even me 2 straight games. I've looked towards him. I really thought he was going to be better than that. And I still think there are brighter days ahead. So in regards to Will Barton, I think I'm going to be on him in tournaments. I don't know if I'm going to be heavily on him, but I'm definitely going to have a few shares just in case, he gets back to the 25-5 ways he was, earlier in the season. But I think Devin Booker's in a tough spot tonight. Maybe I'm overselling Victor Oladipo, but I think he's a very tough matchup. He's a very good perimeter defender. I think Booker, he had a good night last night, but he's been playing kind of minutes in the low 20s, and I'm not sure that if he doesn't get hot early like he did yesterday, that he's gonna see close to 30 minutes tonight. So Booker tournament only, but not even really a guy that I'm loving for tournaments. I'd much rather J.R. Smith if we're looking in tournaments, but that's just me.
Mm-hmm. No, I'd agree with that take. I mean, that's kind of the way I'm looking at it too. I'm fading Booker completely tonight, and Barton is basically only a tournament option for me.
Oladipo just got downgraded to questionable for
I just saw that. So, I mean, if he's out, now we're talking maybe I like Booker a little bit more. Maybe he does become somewhat of a tournament option. Nick, what do you like at shooting guard?
I'm definitely on Middleton like you were talking about. I love that game, how we were talking about it earlier. Big total. I think it's the second highest total of the night, so I can easily see Giannis and Middleton going off, and Bayless as well. So I think all three of those guys are in play for me. And behind Middleton, I really like Oladipo if he plays, but now that he's got this injury, I think I'll probably shy away from him since there's better options. I like Barton. I like Nick Batum. I think he's coming around a little bit. He's finding his shot against 2 bad teams, against the Suns and Sixers, so he might be kind of getting on a roll here. And then I like Zach LaVine as well against Milwaukee. I just love loading up on that game tonight.
Can you guys hear Ricky or no?
No, I think he's muted.
No.
But I don't
Can
think
you hear me now?
There we go.
There you go.
Yeah, stop hitting that mute button. What are you doing?
When I yawn or something, I hit the mute button, then I forget
you're
to come
yawning
back
when
on.
Nick's talking now. Okay, that's
No. I yawned when Benny was talking, to be fair.
Oh.
So who do you like at shooting guard tonight? Are you on board with those or no?
Yeah, I like actually some of the guys they just mentioned, but I want to add Evan Fournier as well. I don't think anybody's talking about him because he is coming off an injury. So if he doesn't have a minutes restriction, I know he's out on the practice floor right now testing his injury. But if there's no minutes restriction, I think he's going to be an excellent play because he has a terrific matchup against the Suns. Phoenix is 24 against 2 guards and 27th against 3 forwards, and those are the 2 positions that Fournier would play depending on who's on the floor. It's going to be a very fast-paced game between those 2 teams. And the Suns do not defend the perimeter very well, and that's exactly where Fournier is successful. And I also saw the Sixers are starting, and wait, listen for this. This is actually a real NBA starting lineup.
Yeah, this is brutal.
Ish Smith, Robert Covington, Hollis Thompson, Jeremy Grant, and Carl Landry. So I think the line of that Miami game is going to favor them by about 400 tonight. What do you think?
I think that honestly, I think that makes Josh Richardson shooting guard on FanDuel for 3,700 for the Heat like a legit good punt play at shooting guard.
So you're saying Stauskas?
Josh Richardson.
Oh, Josh Richardson. Yeah, no, I
For the
mean he's
Heat.
going to play the whole second half if they're up by 50.
I actually
Yeah.
like Covington too as a small forward when we get there. I think in that lineup he's got to score.
Has to. He has to.
Yeah.
There's nobody else. I mean, Hollis Thompson. I actually saw. Listen to this. Thompson and McConnell are on minutes limits too. So Elton Brand's going to play basketball tonight.
Oh my goodness.
This could be ugly. I don't know if I'm going to turn that on. I might just throw my TV out the window before that game starts.
I thought they just signed him to be like a mentor. Now he's actually going to have to get on the court. He's probably the most pissed off of anyone, to be honest.
Yeah, probably.
All right, let me give you a couple other names. I think Middleton's my go-to in cash, but if you can't afford him, let's say you got 100 to spare. I think Wade has been a guy that I have been shocked, actually. You look at his back-to-back numbers, and these might surprise you guys. He hasn't played less than 29 minutes on a back-to-back this season. And his three last back-to-backs, here are his fantasy points. 52.5, 35.5, and 46.75. I mean, this is an old man who we expect to sit, but apparently, Spoelstra hasn't had that same idea. So he's been playing. We know the matchup is good tonight. Now, with the guys out, maybe he only plays 3/4, so it's risky. But I think he's worth a shot. And I might be the only one here, but I think I prefer Wiggins to Levine tonight for not that much more. He's had at least 34 fantasy points in every matchup against Milwaukee in his career, which is 3 of them. He's done some solid scoring against them, which is how we know he gets his fantasy points. So I think if I was going with one of those guys, I go with Wiggins. And I actually think J.R. Smith is very solid. I actually think I'll have a tournament lineup with probably Kyrie, J.R. Smith, and LeBron James, because that's really their big three right now. Without Love, they all get a boost despite their prices being the same. Does anyone have anything else to say about shooting guard?
On FanDuel, there's like a $900 difference between Wiggins and Levine. I don't know how it is on other sites, but Levine is the much better play on FanDuel, I think, with Wiggins at 6,200 and Levine at 5,300.
Yeah, on DraftKings it's 5,600 to 6,000, so it's a
Yeah,
$400 difference. And on Fantasy Draft it's 10-4 to 11-1, so it's the same kind of deal. But yeah, maybe FanDuel, I see Levine, but I think overall on the other sites I prefer Wiggins. And I agree with Benny that you really like spending up on shooting guards. I mean, Middleton's been so consistent, but you look at those Wiggins numbers against Milwaukee, he's consistent too. To save the $1,300, that's probably the route I'm going to go. If not, even spend down on J.R. Smith. Anyone else, anything all, or should we move on to small forward? All right.
We're good.
We'll move on then. I've been waiting for this part of the show all day because I wanted to wish you guys a happy holidays, especially if you're religious. Happy LeBronica to all of you guys.
There we go. Rookie with the puns.
I wrote my Today's Plays article today for FantasyDraft.com. I, of course, always do a pun, and I just think LeBron James is above and beyond the best play, maybe on each site if you're spending up. On FanDuel, he's 9,800. I almost don't care. I mean, without Kevin Love, this is a guy who is going to get, his use, you talk about Kyrie's going up, his goes up to almost 37%. So again, above league leading totals. He's averaging 51 fantasy points in 2 meetings against Washington with Love, and now we're talking about a guy without him. He scored 59 fantasy points against him last time. So, Collacchi, you going to be celebrating some LeBronica tonight?
I don't know if we can call it that, but I definitely will have a lot of LeBron. He's going to be the first guy I click on because it's rare, but I'm actually building around 2 expensive small forwards tonight. I'll talk about the other one in a little bit. But, yeah, like you said, LeBron's usage is almost 37%. His assists rate is almost 35%, which is absurd for a small forward, although he basically will be handling the ball a lot, as we all know. But he is eligible at small forward on every site. And in addition, he's second on the team in rebounding without Love on the floor, too, just behind Tristan Thompson. So I think you're getting a guy that has the ability to do everything, as we've all seen, but he also has an elite matchup against the Wizards, who are, if not they are one of the worst teams in the NBA against small forwards. So basically, the stars are aligning for LeBron. So I think he's going to be the highest known player in cash, and I think you have to go after him as well, especially in cash games.
It's funny you say it that way. Are those the stars of David aligning for LeBron, or are those just the stars?
Here we go.
All right, let's go to Benny before I make any more terrible jokes. Benny, what are you doing at small forward?
Yeah, I'm gonna steal Josh's thunder a little bit here because I think what he's talking about with the two small forward lineup today is going with LeBron and going with Giannis. Is that correct?
I'm actually not going with Giannis. It's interesting, so I'll be glad to hear what you have to say about the Greek Freak.
All right, well, yeah, I am going with Giannis, and I'm doing the same thing and building around the two of them. Price on FanDuel I think is 8,300. Price on DraftKings is 7,700. When MCW's out, I actually watched some of that game the other day, and they actually have him like bringing the ball up, going to the hole from the top of the key, making some of the, plays to initiate the offense, and one of the guys who winds up with the ball in his hands at the end of the shot clock, which is something that I'm always interested in seeing when I'm watching a game, because those are usually the guys that get the higher usage and wind up taking the most shots. So Giannis has been in that situation. And if you look at the game logs that he's had, I mean, his bad games, he's throwing up 35, 40 fantasy points. His good games, he's flashed 60 and 70-point kind of upside lately. So I have no problem rolling him out there. I like that game. Nick's been talking about it all day. It's going to be fast-paced. There's going to be a lot of points scored in that one. So I'm going to have a lot of shares of the Greek Freak tonight.
Nick, what are your thoughts here?
All about the Greek Freak tonight. I mean, I'm all over that game, man. I see myself stacking like 6 or 7 dudes from that game in cash, to be honest. But I think I might be fading LeBron, which is kind of scary to think about. But I think Giannis is one of my locks for lineup. I'm just locking him in as soon as I start building lineups. Him and Kyrie for sure. And then I've also tinkered with the idea of punting small forward with Shabazz Muhammad from that same game. And then Bojan Bogdanovic for the Nets against the Nuggets. I mean, this dude's taken 12 shots a game since Joe Johnson was bought out by the Nets. So if his shots fall, and he has monster like 10x or 8 to 10x upside.
Yeah, I mean, you look at his minutes since the departure of Johnson, 38, 23, 35, 31. His fantasy points, 26, 11.75, 28.5, 33.25. His usage has gone from 17 to 23. So Bogdanovic, I mean, 4,400 on DraftKings. If you need that second, forward position in cash, I actually think Bogdanovic is viable. I don't think I would use him as my first. I think LeBron is an absolute lock for cash pretty much on all sites. But yeah, I think Bogdanovic is a guy you can complement him with. I think Lance Stevenson needs to be mentioned even in a game that's really got a crappy pace, and it's not a great matchup, but he's still only 4,000, and you look at his numbers with the Grizzlies. He's only played 22 and a half minutes, but he's averaging 11.8 points, 4 rebounds, 2.3 assists. So, that's some decent production from a guy who's much lower end, and I don't think a lot of people are going to look to that game and be like, you know what, I should, start a guy or two from here. And I actually like a few of the values in that game. So I actually might go there, in terms of punts. And there's one higher price guy that I like. And I think Paul George should be mentioned because I think he's a decent alternative. Or maybe if you want to go 2 small forwards, on FanDuel, if you're, fading Giannis, which is, I wouldn't necessarily recommend, but I think you could go Bron and George. George just put up 53 fantasy points on February 26th against Charlotte, including 32 points. And then here's a guy that I'm circling just because of his price, Gordon Hayward. I mean, 6,600 on DraftKings, 11.7 on Fantasy Draft. The DraftKings price is ridiculous. The fantasy draft price is even more ridiculous. I mean, this is a guy that needs to be priced higher than that. You could use him just to take advantage of that. Collacchi, do you agree with this, or do you want to finish your point from earlier?
Well, I think with all you guys talking about Giannis, and I actually wanted to make a quick comment about that. Ricky, I think you're polluting my brain because when Nick said, let's be honest, I thought he said, let's be Giannis, and that just all the puns are just kind of just going right through my brain all afternoon, and I'm not quite sure how to go on. But the guy that I am pairing LeBron with, the guy that I'm paying up for, is Carmelo Anthony tonight in cash, which I know I've said before I don't like volume shooters in cash, but I really love Carmelo Anthony's matchup against Boston. The Celtics are 21st defending the 3, they're 26th defending the 4, so when Porzingis or Lopez are off the floor and they go small for a little bit, you're looking at Carmelo to have a good matchup there as well. He does have a lead upside. because he's the main scorer for that entire game, basically. And I think a lot of people are going to be on George. A lot of people are going to be on Giannis, and of course LeBron. I think people are sleeping on Carmelo. So I think he's an excellent tournament play, but I'm using him in cash as well.
There you go. Anyone have any other comments? Maybe some lesser guys that you're looking at, maybe the Wall Dangs, Bazemores of the world, or do you want to be done with small forward?
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of Bazemore here today, too. He's gone for like 30 fantasy points in his last 3 games. His price is still really cheap, and I think you're going to have a lot more people drawn to the Robert Covingtons and the Jeremy Grants who are at the same price, especially now that we got all that news about all the guys on Philly that are out. So I think Bazemore, great matchup against the LA Lakers. I would have liked it better if Kobe was out there trying to defend anybody at this point, but you know they've still been bad against wings all year. So everybody's been putting up big numbers against LA. So Bazemore's a guy that I like when I'm looking to save money, especially for cash over on FanDuel and DraftKings actually.
And
yeah, go ahead.
If Evan Fournier is a game time decision now, along with Oladipo, if both those guys miss or one of them miss, I think Mario Hezonja is definitely in play as a cheap punt against a terrible Suns team. He should just get a ton of run.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with that.
Fournier is questionable now too.
Yeah, he just got downgraded to game time decision.
Yeah, and Oladipo's warming up to see if he can go.
The Magic know they're gonna just crush the Suns, so I don't think they're gonna push these guys through.
Collacchi, I got a question for you from Twitter. First of all, let's go. Who do you like tonight between Grant and Covington? Because it seems like one of them is going to be in play now, right? As our staff Sixers expert, which way would you go there?
I don't know if I like that title or not, depending on how they play. But just talking about the Sixers real quick, they're going to have 10 guys in that rotation tonight. And that includes Hollis Thompson, T.J. McConnell, and Elton Brand, who are all going to be on minutes limits. Of course, Brand minutes limits are probably like 7 at this point in his career because he hasn't played in the NBA in what feels like 3 decades. So I think the guys that are going to play a lot of minutes tonight are Ish Smith, Hollis Thompson, Covington, Grant, and I think Rashawn Holmes is actually going to play a lot tonight as well. So between Covington and Grant, to answer the question, I think Covington definitely has the better upside as a scorer, but I think Grant's a guy that could get 10 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists, a couple steals, a couple blocks, and he has the ability to play the 4, the 3, and when they run small, he could play the 5 as well. And I think that's how the Heat might match up. If Whiteside's not on the floor, you're looking at Dang or Winslow at the 5 as well. And I think it could be a game that's between 2 very fast-paced teams until halftime when Miami's up by 500.
Man, I cannot stand when it comes down to these Sixers, what's going to decide a tournament. I mean, we got the Ish Smiths, the Landrys, the Covingtons, the Grants. I hate when this happens in terms of daily fantasy. But, one of them is going to have to produce, I guess. Even if they get down big, this team's still going to score 70, 80 points, so you got to look at them. But it is frustrating. All right, let's go to power forward. I'm going to start with you guys on this one because I want to close. I think I've got 2 guys that neither of you will be on. Not that they're obscure, but I think that you guys may go in different directions. Benny, you want to start it off at power forward? Who do you like tonight?
Guy that I have a lot of exposure to in the lineups I've made already is actually Julius Randle, and the reasoning for it is I was expecting Kobe to probably be out, Clarkson very likely to miss as well, and he's just priced really well. I think he's 61 on FanDuel, he's 59 on DraftKings. This is a guy that's put up like 45, 4.5x value on DraftKings, and something crazy like 17 of his last 20 games or something like that. He's been getting a lot of double-doubles. If you get a double-double, you're basically guaranteed a minimum of like 27 fantasy points right there. So I think he's in a good spot here for another double-double. I really like the price on him. And then after that, there are certain guys that I'm only using, kind of site-dependent, but in that same kind of mid-range. Like Aaron Gordon at 6,400 on FanDuel, I think is like free money, so he's going to be in a lot of my rosters over there. You got Jabari Parker, still only 5,900 on FanDuel. I think that's free money. And then Jared Sellinger is a guy that I really like for tournaments that's going kind of under the radar on spots that he's listed as a power forward. Not very expensive. Without Olynyk in that lineup, he's really been producing some big numbers lately. Had 37 fantasy points the other night, and he didn't even play in the fourth quarter because they were winning that game by so much. So I like Solinger a little bit as well. That 6K range around there is really where I'm looking for a lot of my plays at power forward.
Nick, are you on the Parker bandwagon considering he seems to fit your strategy tonight?
Yeah, I love Parker tonight, but Benny touched on Julius Randle. I think he's in my lineup. I think Hawks are just the worst rebounding team in the league. He'll play a little bit of center. He'll play a lot of power forward. I mean, he should. I think he could easily flirt with a 15 and 15 line and crush value on FanDuel for sure. But since I'm paying down in a lot of spots I've talked about, I like Thad Young a lot too against the Nuggets. I mean, he's playing a ton of minutes at the 4. I mean, he's taking more shots with Joe Johnson out of the picture, and he's just crushing right now. He put up 41 FanDuel points against the Lakers last time on, and Kenneth Faried's defense doesn't scare me whatsoever.
Collacchi, you got any different takes? Are you on board with Thad Young, Jabari Parker, or are you going elsewhere?
Yeah, actually, the 3 guys I've written down here are Millsap, Thad Young, and Aaron Gordon, which I think we all agree on. But I just wanted to say that Victor Oladipo is ruled out for tonight. He will not play, but Evan Fournier will play. So you're looking at a guy that will probably have a lot of usage with Elfrid Payton and Fournier. And I think to Nick's point, I think Hazonia is an excellent play again now as well. But moving on to my power forward tonight. Of course, I mentioned those 3, but I think you have to look at Carl Landry and Rashawn Holmes, especially on FanDuel at mid-price. They're going to play a lot, and I think Landry is a guy that is an excellent 18-foot jump shooter. Doesn't really do much else, but at 3,500, if he makes 5 of those and gets a couple rebounds, you're looking at 5 to 6 times value already. So I think he's a guy that you're going to want to take a look at. He should play over 25 minutes, and at mid-price, it's just not many other options you can get on tonight's slate.
Interesting. This has played out just like I thought. I want to state that up front, that I think I'm going to be contrarian at power forward tonight. I know you guys are kind of focusing on FanDuel, so at least one of them is not really a FanDuel play, but I really like Derek Favors tonight. The Grizzlies have been going small a ton without Marc Gasol, basically because their personnel won't allow them to do anything else. I mean, I looked at their lineup combinations, and they've had Matt Barnes play power forward. They've had Lance Stevenson play power forward. They've even had Vince Carter play power forward in some of their smaller lineups. Now, I don't think they'll be able to do that as much tonight, but even if they have Zach Randolph on Favors, I mean, Favors there's no one who can match up with him. And you look at Favors' history, and this is with Gobert and with Gasol active. So this was, the Grizzlies' best defensive units. He's scored at least 39.5 fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 against them. So Favors has torched the Grizzlies despite the slow play. I think that he's going to be the focus tonight for their team in terms of offense. So I think Favors puts up some nice numbers. I think he can approach a double-double. I think he's got a nice floor because, I think his last game he had 4 combined blocks and steals, and he averages 1 and 1. So I think Favors is a guy with a really, really high floor. For DraftKings and Fantasy Draft, he's an excellent cash play. And how about Kristaps Porzingis? This is a guy I like in all formats, and his price is way down everywhere. I mean, I know Robin Lopez has been playing well, but Porzingis has been pretty consistent his last few as well. We're looking at 6,500 on DraftKings, 6,400 on FanDuel, 11.7 on Fantasy Draft. And his numbers against the Celtics this season in 3 meetings, 41.5 fantasy points, 46, and 18.75. So he had 1 dud, but he had 2 monsters. And at this price, I'm definitely willing to take the shot on him that Boston really doesn't have anyone who can match up with him. I think Porzingis, you even could go with him in cash because I just have a feeling that this is going to be a monster performance for him. Is anyone down with any of those guys, at least in tournaments, or am I all alone?
I think that sums it up, right?
I guess that sums it up. No one else on Favors or Porzingis, so it's going to be interesting. One of us is going to be right. And as long as we're still talking about other guys, no one mentioned Millsap. I don't love him. I think he's always a cash option. Maybe we should talk about Tristan Thompson. He's kind of the left-out member of the Cavs, that we talked about Smith, we talked about James, we talked about Irving, all passionately. And the last time Love sat out, Thompson was mediocre, but he had 15 rebounds. He just didn't score anything, which is kind of his MO. Do we like Tristan Thompson, even though Washington's a pretty difficult matchup against, bigs? Or are we just going with the other guys?
I mean, Washington's 28th in rebounding rate, so I could see Tristan grabbing like 15 boards again. He just needs to score 8 to 10 real-life points,
and that's always the obstacle
Yeah.
with him. But I think he could do it in a fast-paced game. I mean, Washington's not as good as they once were, but I still think it's a game where, the starters play a heavy amount of minutes, at least for, Cleveland.
What do you think happens here? Does Tristan play the 4 now and Mozgov at center?
I think there will be stints with that, but I think there will also be stints with Tristan Thompson playing center. He can give guys fits. I think he's a fine matchup against Gortat. I think it's going to be a little bit of both. So I don't think you can just say Washington's this against power forwards. I think Thompson's going to play both.
I think you'll see a lot of Channing Frye as well.
Yeah,
obviously.
I agree with that, and I don't think I would consider Frye just because he's totally scoring dependent, but Tristan's a name that I keep looking at that, if you get that double-double, I mean, he costs you nothing anywhere.
At that same price on FanDuel, 4,700, I like Mirza Teletovic still a lot. I think this could be a blowout for sure, but even with Oladipo out, I still think it could be a blowout. But even if it's not, Teletovic is still their number one guy off the bench for scoring, their number 3 option behind Booker and Alex Len right now. So I love him at 4,700 still.
Yeah, on FanDuel, he's definitely in play. On other sites, they've jacked his price up a little too much. Like, he's almost 57 over on DraftKings, and I can't do Mirza at 57 on DraftKings.
Yeah, that's way too rich.
Yeah, 47 on FanDuel, though. That's definitely nice, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. I made that comment about Teletovic a few days ago. That price is too much for me with the way his minutes are going. His minutes have kind of been down a little recently with P.J. Tucker's up, but I got no interest in P.J. Tucker. He doesn't do a whole lot. I mean, he's 4,600 on DraftKings, but still, cash maybe, but he's just not exciting. I agree that Teletovic at 5,700 too much, but I didn't have his FanDuel price, and I think I would play him at that. The last guy I want to mention, because I got to have a minimum guy everywhere just to get Collacchi ignited. How about Jonas Jerebko for the Boston Celtics? He's coming off a 23 fantasy point game. Listen to this. In his last 6 games, he's played under 19 minutes just once, and he's definitely one of Brad Stevens' favorite guys. So he's going to see some time. He's the bare minimum basically everywhere. If you need a punt somewhere, I think I'd prefer Huertas, but Jerebko maybe for tournaments just in case he repeats that performance. I mean, that would be, 8 times value? So there is a little upside there just at this price. Collacchi, would you like to comment?
Every day when I wake up, I look forward to the show because I want to hear 3 random guys you can think of. And I know Jerebko played a lot of minutes. I'm not saying it's a terrible play. It's just funny to hear you say Marcelo Huertas and Jonas Jerebko. But I do want to comment on them. I do think that both of those punts are going to be even lesser owned than you would have think, especially with all the value with the Sixers now. So those are 2 guys that are going to be incredibly low owned. And touching on the power forwards in FanDuel, Jeremy Grant is 5,000. So I think guys like Tristan Thompson and Mirza Teletovic are going to be at the same price range, much lower owned. So it's a thing to keep in mind in tournaments.
The chat room loves your reactions, Collacchi. Maybe I'll have to make a montage one of these days. Just sort of your reaction and you falling over in your seat every time I mention one of those $3,000 players. That would be entertaining. We got 10 minutes left, so let's move on to center. I think Hassan Whiteside is going to be an interesting guy tonight now. I think we were all on him before, but now with this news that basically the Sixers have no choice but to go small, is he still the play at the position? Nick, you want to start us off?
Yeah, Whiteside was actually going to be my bold call about the highest score on the slate, but I can't do that anymore. I don't know if he's going to play more than 25 minutes. He played 23 last night in a blowout, and I think this is even going to be an even bigger blowout. So I can't go there anymore. I think Alex Len is definitely the chalk play of the night. He's just playing a ton of minutes. Not a great matchup against Vucevic, but it's not a horrible one. He's double-double every night, but crushing Valley at 5,300 on FanDuel. So I think he's going to be the way a lot of people go tonight.
Benny, what do you think?
I think on FanDuel, Alex Len is almost a lock for me at 53. He's a little more expensive on DraftKings at 57, and you need a little bit more upside out of him over there. But even over on DraftKings, he was one of the guys I talked about in the video today. I just think he's too cheap for the role that he has right now. So, with him playing over 30 minutes the last couple games and putting up over, 32 fantasy points in each one, I still think I'm going to go back to that well again tonight. So, Alex Len definitely the top option. It's tough for me because before we got on the show here, I have Whiteside written down as the guy that I was going to be targeting against that Philly team. So now I got to look, maybe like a Brook Lopez, something like that. But, I really got to do some more research now at center because that definitely ruins what I had on my teams that I made before we got on the air here.
Yeah, I was going to suggest Brook Lopez. I was actually on him over Whiteside before. I really didn't think that if Okafor were out at least, Whiteside was going to come off the bench, but by then, Noah would be out of the rotation. They don't really have any other bigs, so I wasn't necessarily sold on that Whiteside was going to play his full allotment of minutes, but I really like Brook Lopez against this Nuggets team. He if you look at his fantasy points, he struggled the last game, but he shot 55% from the field, so it's not like he wasn't he wasn't feeling it. It's just that they had Joe Johnson and he had an off game, and I think if we looked at a bigger sample size, Brook Lopez would have more than his average against the Nuggets over the long haul. And you look at Lopez's price on Fantasy Draft especially, he's one of the top fantasy point per dollar guys already. He's almost at 3 times value just at his regular price. So if he's going to go, more than his season average, which I think he will against the Nuggets team that's not great at defending centers, I think Lopez is going to, put up more than enough for value on both there and DraftKings. I don't know about FanDuel. 8,500 is a little high, but I like Lopez. Collacchi, who do you like tonight?
I actually like the guy that Lopez is going to be, I don't want to say defending, but try to defend, and Nikola Jokic, who I have to ask Nick here because he's the Jokic whisperer. Is he going to have a good night tonight? It's completely in your hands.
I know I was on Jokic last time we were on this show, and he went in 5x, but I'm not feeling him tonight. I think if you're paying at that price, I'd rather just play Alex Len at 5,300, who's $300 cheaper than Jokic tonight.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that brings me to another thing about game theory, which we just discussed about power forwards. At center, especially with Len basically being the chalk, meaning a lot of people are going to have him, guys like Jokic are going to be low owned. So if you want to use that in a tournament, I think that's the way I'm going to approach it with the unpredictability at center with Mike Malone, as we talked about before coming on the show. But he has a good matchup against Lopez. He averages over 1.2 fantasy points per minute. And I've noticed a trend a little bit with the Nuggets centers. When they play against teams with bigs that they can't necessarily move much, which is exactly what Brook Lopez is, they seem to play Jokic a lot more. So I think I'm confident with using him in tournaments for cash. I think it's just worth using Len because you're going to get that ownership percentage. And if he struggles, I don't think it's going to matter with all the people on him. But I think the chance of him struggling is very low, especially since he starts at the 4. So he's going to get those extra minutes in a terrific matchup against a much smaller Aaron Gordon to begin the game.
Yeah, and I think we'd be hard-pressed not to mention Karl Anthony Towns over the course of a show, considering that he's pretty much emerged as a top 10 to 15 player in the NBA. And I know I was looking at him last week on both DraftKings and Fantasy Draft. I think his price was approaching $9,000, and he was approaching $16,000 on Fantasy Draft. He hasn't exactly been awful. I mean, he had one mediocre game, and now he's down to 8,200 and 14.6. So, the matchup, not necessarily the greatest thing in the world, but at some point, he's just a great player, and he can get it done against everyone. So I think Towns is worth mentioning. I think Valanciunas has a good matchup. They're playing Portland, so he's kind of cheap. 5,000 on DraftKings. Jeez, I didn't even realize his price was that low, but that's just not enough for Valanciunas, so I think you could use him as a mid-tier option in pretty much any formats. And then Horford, Vucevic, they're fine. I don't love either. Horford's got a great matchup. Maybe that game stays closer than we think for tournaments. Vucevic without Oladipo, probably more usage going through him. But there's the Skiles factor, so he's a little risky. And I think on DraftKings prefer to go with Lopez. Does anyone have any other thoughts before we get to the bold calls?
I was just going to say Lopez on DraftKings, I think, is going to be the play now. Other than Alex Len without Whiteside in there. He has a 29.8% usage rate, which puts him as the 11th highest at any position on the slate today. So he's definitely going to be the guy that I'm putting in there for the Whiteside shares that I had.
Yeah, I think Lopez is a very safe play tonight. He is definitely one of my favorites. All right, now it's our favorite segment. We've actually been pretty good with these. I don't think we've been keeping track of who's nailed theirs on certain nights. I think the nights we get it right, we'll talk about it on Twitter, and the nights we get it wrong, we'll go silent on Twitter. So we probably got a decent success rate. But let's go with bold calls. Collacchi, you want to start us off because I think you got one pre-planned.
Yeah, I had one when the show started, and then halfway through I had two, and I think I almost have three now. But I'm just going to go with two. My first one is I think Kyrie Irving's going to have 50 FanDuel points or more, which means he could have over 55 on DraftKings. I just think that this pace, his bump in usage, is going to be one of those games where he has a chance to just be on fire from three. And in this kind of game where John Wall's going to be defending him, they're just going to be running up and down the floor pretty much for the duration of the 48 minutes. This is a game that Kyrie Irving could dominate, and I think that's what's going to happen. My other one is Carl Landry, 25 fantasy points. There's nobody else on that Sixers team that really knows how to score. And it sounds weird that I'm looking at Carl Landry to be a scorer, but that's really the only guy that can shoot on that team. And looking at the Sixers in their current situation with all those guys out, it is a limited sample, but he's averaging over 1.1 fantasy points per minute. And the only guy below zero point 0.8 fantasy points per minute that's available for the Sixers tonight is Isaiah Cannon. So there's a lot of guys that are expected to run a lot. All of their paces are well over 100. So even if they're getting killed, I think the Sixers are going to be one of those teams that just has a lot of fantasy value. I know Benny likes to target teams with shallow rotations. So I think my third bold call at Sixers stack, which may not be too bold, definitely is going to win GPPs tonight.
Any more bold calls, or should we take a number?
I think I'm going to go up to 31 tonight, but I'll make my bold calls the same amount of point guards you're targeting tonight.
No, it's okay. I was just sitting here waiting patiently in line while the guy at the front argued with the cashier.
Take a number.
All right, let's go to you, Benny. What do you got for a bold call tonight after Collacchi's 17 of them?
Yeah, he took about 4 of the ones at the top of my list. So, no, one of my favorite bold calls for tonight, Elf Payton on FanDuel and DraftKings is going to give you 7x value on his return. So that sounds like a lot, but his price is only around $5K, and I think you're going to get around 35 fantasy points out of him today. And before you think that I'm crazy, go take a look at the game logs, because 2 of the last 3 games he has gotten you those 35 fantasy points. And now without Oladipo to steal some minutes from him at the point guard spot, I think we see 35 to 40 minutes out of him, and I think we're going to see 35 fantasy points out of him tonight. So, Elf Payton, my bold call of the day.
There you go. We didn't even mention him during the point guards, so there is definitely a bold call. Nick, what do you got for us? I know Whiteside kind of ruined your night, but you got anything else in his place?
Let's go Julius Randle 6x on FanDuel. That's about all I can come up with. Or all 3 of Middleton, Giannis, and Jabari Parker each score 40 FanDuel points.
There you go. I think I'm going to go with Porzingis for my bold call tonight. I'm feeling a Porzingis game. He's really gotten it done against the Celtics. His price is dipped way too cheap. I think he's going to reward people who roster him with a 20-10 game with 2 blocks, or about 45 fantasy points tonight. I think this is just too low for him. The Celtics just don't have anyone to match up with him. I think Porzingis has a monster night tonight. I think you can use him in any format. So that is all for us today. Collacchi, you made it through without vomiting, so that is definitely
that's good.
Victory.
That's good. I almost happened when you said Jerebko, but we'll go with it.
Benny, you fit right in. We didn't even notice, Jim out. It was basically, just a 1-for-1 swap that I felt good with as a general manager.
Yeah, I actually am going to make a second bold call because I thought it was going to be yours and I didn't want to steal your thunder. But my second bold call on my way out the door here right now, calling my shot, 65 fantasy points for LeBron James tonight.
Woo.
Love it.
I would love that. That would make me a rich man tonight. Nick, you want to throw out one more bold call, or you got any final words for our viewers tonight?
Mario Hezonja, 30 FanDuel points.
Love
There
it.
you go, guys.
Love
All
it.
the bold calls you could possibly want and more. We've
We should
overloaded you.
rename the show Bold Calls.
Exactly. We should start with that at 4:15 or 5:15 your time. But again, check out the free roll. We got one on DraftKings tonight. Rotocurve.com/free roll. It couldn't be any freer. So literally, you're wasting money if you don't join it. Again, if you need any more NBA help, check out the NBA tools on Rotocurve.com. And you may or may not see a lot of me next week. I'm going to be in Arizona on family vacation. But until our next show, we are out. Thanks and good luck tonight, everyone.